The SOS was never meant for them. It began as a dying whisper, a weak pulse of data bleeding out from the edge of mapped space, bouncing between stars like a lost echo. It carried no formal codes, no diplomatic seals, no promises of reward. Just coordinates, fragmented telemetry, and one unmistakable truth woven into the signal structure: someone was being erased. Across the galaxy, advanced civilizations intercepted it and quietly archived the message. Some analyzed the odds and dismissed it as a lost cause. Others feared what might be responsible and chose silence over sacrifice. A few watched. And waited. Because the region where the signal originated had a reputation. Ships went missing there. Fleets vanished. Entire species avoided its gravitational shadow. Only one world responded, Earth. On the galactic scale, humanity was still considered a minor power. Loud, chaotic, emotionally unstable. A species from a brutal planet where predators ruled, whether killed without mercy, and survival itself was an unending contest. A death world. Most alien civilizations considered humans useful allies in theory and terrifying liabilities in practice. They were known to overcommit, overreact, and refuse to retreat long after logic demanded it. When Earth's deep space arrays decoded the SOS, there was no debate. The signal spoke of a civilian convoy trapped in a collapsing system. Hunted by an unknown armada. Life signs were fading. Time was measured in hours, not days. The region lay beyond human borders, beyond treaties, beyond safety, and yet engines ignited. Human warships tore free from orbital docks, hulls scarred from previous conflicts, systems modified and overdriven beyond original design limits. These were not pristine vessels built for ceremonial deterrence. They were tools forged by necessity, patched with hard-earned experience and piloted by crews who had grown up under skies that tried to kill them. As the fleet accelerated into slip space, distant alien observers took notice. They watched the trajectory in disbelief. The Deathworlders were heading straight into the red zone. The region was worse than the data suggested. Stars burned unstable and violent, space itself warped by overlapping gravity wells. Wreckage drifted in slow, silent spirals, ships of unfamiliar design, torn apart with surgical brutality. No signs of negotiation. No survivors. Human sensors drank it all in. The crews felt it in the quiet moments between alerts. In the way hands tightened around controls. In the silence that fell whenever new debris appeared on the forward displays. This was not a battlefield. It was a slaughterhouse. Then the enemy revealed itself. The alien fleet emerged from behind a fractured moon, massive and disciplined, ships arranged with mathematical precision. Their hulls were smooth, cold, devoid of insignia. They moved like a single organism, weapons already aligned with the helpless convoy hiding in the system's shadow. The attacking fleet did not acknowledge the human arrival. To them, this was already over. That was their first mistake. Human ships did not announce themselves with demands or warnings. They surged forward, engines flaring like burning stars, formations shifting unpredictably. Alien targeting systems struggled as the Deathworlders broke every expected pattern, accelerating into vectors no sane species would choose. The first exchange lit the system. Human rail cannons thundered, kinetic slugs screaming through vacuum with unstoppable intent. Missiles followed, not in clean salvos, but in chaotic waves designed to overwhelm prediction algorithms. Shields flared. Space folded under the violence. Alien ships exploded, not strategically. Not cleanly, violently. The convoy watched in stunned disbelief as vessels that had hunted them for days suddenly began to die. Human ships weaved between enemy fire, closing distances no tactician would recommend, striking from angles that defied conventional engagement doctrine. Because humans did not fight like anyone else, they fought like survivors. Alien commanders attempted to adapt, reorganizing formations, recalculating probabilities. It didn't matter. Humans changed tactics mid-charge. Turning damage into momentum, sacrificing pristine positioning for decisive impact. One cruiser rammed straight through an enemy formation, weapons firing until the moment of collision, then detonated its core in a controlled blast that took 3 hostile ships with it. The convoy's sensors recorded the moment alien coordination faltered. Fear had entered the system. Across nearby sectors, automated warning relays activated. Observers transmitted emergency updates to their homeworlds. The data was impossible to ignore now. A Deathworld species had answered an SOS that the rest of the galaxy had abandoned, and they were winning. As the final enemy ships attempted retreat, human vessels pursued without hesitation. Engines screamed. Hulls glowed from heat stress. The Deathworlders did not allow escape, not today. When silence finally returned to the system, it was heavy and absolute. Wreckage drifted where a fleet once ruled. The convoy, battered but alive, emerged slowly from hiding, broadcasting gratitude in trembling signals. Human ships formed a protective perimeter without being asked. No demands followed. No claims of territory. Repairs were offered. Medical aid dispatched. Escorts assigned until the survivors reached safe space. That was when the wider galaxy truly began to understand. This was not an isolated act of heroism. This was policy. Humanity did not answer SOS calls because it was profitable or strategic. They answered because they remembered what it was like to scream into the dark and hear nothing back. They remembered extinction-level threats, near misses, and victories earned at unbearable cost. They were Deathworlders, and when they answered a call for help, they did not arrive to negotiate fear, they arrived carrying it. Somewhere far away, alien war councils replayed the footage again and again. Analysts slowed it frame by frame, trying to understand how a species so young, so reckless, could dismantle a superior force through sheer will and adaptability. The conclusion spread faster than the battle itself. If you are ever lost in the dark, and the Deathworlders answer your call, pray they are coming for you, and not because of you. The galaxy did not sleep after that battle. Across hundreds of star systems, observers replayed the same footage in silent disbelief. Human ships accelerating into impossible vectors. Alien warforms breaking under pressure they had never evolved to feel. A convoy that should have died instead drifting behind a wall of Deathworld steel. What unsettled them most was not the destruction, but the pattern. Humanity had not fought like conquerors. They had fought like something far more dangerous, protectors who would not stop. In the ruins of the shattered system, human crews worked without ceremony. Hull breaches were sealed under drifting starlight. Injured survivors from the convoy were brought aboard human ships, wrapped in thermal blankets, surrounded by medics who spoke gently even when their words could not be understood. Food, water, atmosphere, shared without hesitation. No contracts. No expectations. The convoy's data cores were finally unlocked. What they revealed chilled even human strategists. The attacking fleet had not been pirates, nor a rogue empire. They were an enforcement arm of something vast and ancient, a coalition that quietly culled developing civilizations before they could become unpredictable. Deathworld species were especially targeted. Too adaptive. Too violent. Too creative under pressure. Earth had been flagged years ago. The SOS had never been random, it had been bait. As this truth spread through human command, the fleet did not retreat. Instead, engines stayed hot. Weapons remained powered. Humans had learned the lesson carved into their history again and again. If something hunts you, hiding only delays the inevitable. Far beyond the battlefield, something else was watching. A consciousness embedded within the alien coalition began recalculating. Humanity's response did not align with any known behavioral model. They had entered a kill zone without assurance of victory. They had escalated instead of stabilizing. They had protected strangers with the same ferocity reserved for their own. This was not logical. This was contagious. Signals began appearing across nearby systems. Civilian distress calls that had been suppressed, silenced, buried under layers of probability and indifference. Now they were leaking through, carried by desperation and hope. And every time one appeared, it carried a new variable into the galaxy's equations. Would the Deathworlders hear it? They did. Human fleet split, coordinated across distances that should have fractured command. Smaller task groups diverted, each burning toward a different dying light in the void. Alien observers watched in rising horror as humanity did not consolidate forces or protect borders. They expanded. Every engagement followed the same terrifying rhythm. Humans arrived late, but not too late. They absorbed punishment, adapted instantly, and hit back harder with every second. Enemy formations that relied on intimidation shattered when faced with crews that did not break under losses. Some alien captains attempted surrender for the first time in recorded history. Humanity accepted none of it mid-battle, only after civilians were safe. Only after the threat was neutralized. Only after the screaming stopped. Across the galaxy, ancient treaties were quietly rewritten. Patrol routes shifted away from human space. Predatory fleets rerouted entire campaigns rather than risk encountering Deathworlders in open combat, because now everyone understood the truth. Humanity did not need permission to intervene. They did not wait for consensus. They did not fear escalation. They feared silence. And somewhere, deep within the Coalition's core systems, an emergency directive activated, one never meant to be used. A full-scale response was authorized. Entire armadas began to mobilize, not to punish humanity, but to stop the idea spreading behind them, that a species could choose to answer every cry for help, that survival did not require cruelty, that fear could be weaponized by compassion. As human fleets burned toward the next signal, unaware of the storm gathering ahead, the galaxy reached a single shared conclusion. The Deathworlders were no longer responding to SOS calls. They were changing the rules of existence, and the universe was running out of ways to stop them. The countermeasure did not arrive as a fleet, it arrived as silence. Human task groups burned toward distress signals that vanished mid-transmission. Star systems once alive with traffic went dark, not from destruction, but from absence. No debris. No radiation. Just empty space where civilizations had existed days before. The galaxy was being erased quietly now, efficiently, without spectacle. Humanity recognized the pattern too late. This was not extermination. It was containment. The Coalition had activated a weapon older than any surviving species, a lattice of reality anchors scattered across interstellar space. When activated, they folded entire systems into isolated pockets, severing them from the wider universe. No signals escaped. No ships returned. To the rest of the galaxy, those worlds had simply never existed. Deathworlders were not meant to fight this. Human fleets encountered the first anchor near a red dwarf star, a structure vast beyond scale, humming with controlled gravity and temporal distortion. As they approached, sensors screamed warnings. Space bent. Time staggered. Navigation solutions dissolved into static. Alien defenders emerged, constructs, not crews. Unfeeling. Perfectly synchronized. Built to kill without fear, human ships pressed forward anyway. The first volleys barely scratched the anchor's shielding. Enemy constructs retaliated with precision beams that sliced through cruisers like paper. Ships were lost in seconds. Crews died knowing exactly what was happening, and choosing to stay, because retreat would doom everything behind them. Human commanders adapted instantly. Fleets dispersed, sacrificing cohesion to regain unpredictability. Ships cut engines mid-burn, drifting through distorted space to confuse targeting systems. Weapons were retuned on the fly, firing frequencies designed to destabilize the anchor's control fields rather than breach armor. It worked, barely. As the anchor destabilized, gravity surged violently. A human destroyer was caught at the epicenter, torn apart atom by atom. Its core detonated not as a weapon, but as a message. The explosion rippled through the anchor's lattice, collapsing the pocket system and releasing the trapped stars in a violent, radiant bloom. For the first time in eons, the Coalition panicked. The anchors were not invincible. Across the galaxy, humanity changed tactics. They stopped chasing SOS calls and started hunting the source. Deathworld fleets coordinated strikes across impossible distances, hitting anchors in rapid succession. Losses were catastrophic. Victory came measured in minutes of freedom bought with years of human lives. Alien observers began to withdraw, not because they were winning, but because they were afraid of what humans were becoming. In the aftermath of a shattered anchor, something unexpected emerged from the freed system. Survivors. Species thought erased, drifting in damaged habitats, broadcasting disbelief and gratitude. They spoke of watching humans fight the void itself, of seeing ships burn and still press forward. Stories spread, not propaganda. Witness, humanity was no longer just answering distress calls, they were tearing holes in a cosmic execution protocol. Deep within coalition space, ancient minds convened in emergency communion. Humanity's psychological profile was updated again and again, each iteration more alarming than the last. They did not behave like conquerors, or martyrs, or heroes. They behaved like guardians who did not believe they had a choice. The decision was made: if Deathworlders could not be contained, they would be confronted. A convergence point was selected. A system where space-time itself could be weaponized. Where physics bent toward annihilation. Where the final test would occur, not of strength, but of endurance, as human fleets converged unknowingly toward that system, battered, scarred, and burning with purpose. A truth echoed quietly through every surviving civilization: the Deathworlders were bleeding, but they were still coming, and the galaxy was about to learn what happens when a species that evolved and held decides the universe itself is unacceptable. The convergence system waited like a wound in space. From a distance it appeared calm, a blue-white star wrapped in elegant rings of distorted light. Up close, reality screamed. Gravity flowed sideways. Time fractured into overlapping layers. Every sensor struggled to agree on what existed from one second to the next. This was not a battlefield designed for victory, it was a place designed to end things. Human fleets arrived battered and thinned, hulls patched with emergency plating, crews exhausted yet unbroken. They felt it the moment they crossed the system's boundary. Weapons lagged. Engines resisted commands. Even thought felt heavier, as if the universe itself were pushing back. The coalition's armada emerged slowly, impossibly vast, arranged in cold perfection around the distorted star. Not a display of dominance, but inevitability. Their weapons were tuned to the system's physics, their shields harmonized with the temporal distortions. Every advantage belonged to them, and still, humanity advanced. The first exchange was brutal beyond measure. Coalition fire tore through human lines, ships unraveling as time slipped out of sync around them. Some vessels aged centuries in moments, metal rusting and fracturing before detonating. Others were frozen mid-explosion, locked in eternal destruction. Human fleets adapted in real time, ships cut power entirely. Coasting through temporal shear where powered craft could not survive. Crews synchronized actions not by clocks, but by instinct and visual cues. When sensors failed, humans flew by eye, by memory, by trust. They started winning moments, but moments were not enough, losses mounted. Entire squadrons vanished. Command structures fractured as communication lagged seconds behind reality. Yet not a single human ship turned away. Not one broadcasted surrender. Every crew understood the truth they dared not speak aloud: if they failed here, the galaxy would burn in silence. Then something changed. At the heart of the system, the distorted star began to destabilize. Not from coalition weapons, but from human presence. The Deathworlders had pushed the system beyond the limits it was designed to handle. Chaos, their natural environment, had infected the trap itself. Human scientists saw it first. The system wasn't collapsing, it was reacting. The star flared violently, emitting waves that disrupted coalition synchronization. Perfect formations faltered. Weapon timing drifted. The Armada lost cohesion for the first time in its history. Humanity surged, damaged ships rammed into enemy lines, detonating with purpose. Others lured coalition vessels into gravity wells that tore them apart. Humans used the system's instability as a weapon, embracing the danger rather than resisting it. Alien Command realized the horror too late. This environment punished perfection, it rewarded adaptability. as the battle reached its breaking point, a new signal emerged from within the star itself. Not a broadcast. Not a language, a recognition. The system was not merely a trap, it was an ancient observer, a construct designed to test species at the edge of cosmic relevance. It had watched countless civilizations fail by seeking control. Humanity did not seek control, they endured, they adapted, they refused to abandon others even when logic demanded retreat. The observer shifted, energy surged through the system, destabilizing coalition weapons, stripping them of their synchronization. Human ships, already operating in chaos, gained a sudden, impossible advantage. The armada broke, not in fire, but in retreat. Coalition vessels fled the system, tearing open unstable escape corridors, leaving behind wreckage and stunned silence. The convergence system calmed, the distorted star slowly stabilizing as if satisfied. Human fleets drifted amid the aftermath, devastated but alive. They had walked into a perfect trap, and turned it into a proving ground. Across the galaxy, ancient powers absorbed the impossible truth. The Deathworlders had not just survived the final test, they had changed it, and something far older than fear had taken notice. The galaxy reeled, news of the convergence system spread faster than light ever should have. Carried by panicked couriers, fragmented sensor echoes, and survivors who could barely articulate what they had witnessed. A force older than empires had tested humanity and stepped aside. That alone shattered assumptions held since the first civilizations learned to burn stars for power. Human fleets did not celebrate, they drifted among the wreckage in silence, counting losses measured not in ships, but in names. Burned hulls glowed faintly against the dark, some still carrying frozen echoes of final moments. Medics moved through damaged corridors where gravity came and went. Engineers worked with bleeding hands and exhausted minds, refusing rest because others still depended on them. And then the calls began, not SOS signals this time, confessions. Civilizations that had hidden, complied, or quietly benefited from the coalition's cleansing protocols began transmitting archives they had buried for generations. Records of extinction orders. Of species erased before they could defend themselves. Of Deathworld candidates flagged and eliminated before they could grow teeth. Humanity listened, they did not rage. They did not threaten, they understood. The coalition had ruled not through cruelty alone, but through fear carefully justified as order. And now that order was cracking. Across liberated systems, survivors emerged blinking into starlight, encountering humans not as conquerors, but as shields. Children born in orbital refuges saw human insignia for the first time and learned a new word from their elders, a word that translated imperfectly across languages, but always carried the same meaning: guardians. The coalition responded the only way it knew how. It consolidated. The ancient minds behind the execution protocol withdrew from public space and retreated to their origin systems, fortifying regions of spacetime itself. They did not seek immediate war. They sought inevitability. If humanity could not be destroyed quickly, it would be buried under attrition, isolation, and despair. They underestimated one thing: humans were very familiar with despair. Rather than chase the coalition into fortified space, humanity did something no strategist predicted. They stopped advancing. They turned back toward the wounded galaxy they had cracked open, and began rebuilding. Human ships became moving sanctuaries. Trade lanes reopened under armed escort. Terraforming knowledge was shared freely. Defense platforms were installed around worlds that had never known safety. Humanity did not replace the coalition's rule, they made it irrelevant. Every rescued system became a node of resistance, every grateful civilization a voice that refused to return to silence. When coalition probes approached, they were not met with fleets, but with walls of united space. Species standing together behind human doctrine learned the hard way: no one gets left behind. The coalition began to fracture. Some of its younger member species broke away entirely, refusing to participate in further purges. Others delayed orders, sabotaged enforcement fleets, or leaked intelligence to human allies. Fear was still present, but now it was aimed in a different direction, not at humanity, at what humanity represented, because if Deathworlders could survive hell and still choose to protect instead of dominate, then the old excuses no longer held. At the edge of coalition space, human fleets waited. Repaired. Reinforced. Changed, they were no longer just responders. They were a line the universe could not cross anymore, and somewhere deep within the ancient minds watching from behind folded stars, a realization finally took hold, slow, terrible, and unavoidable. The Deathworlders were not becoming the next empire, they were becoming the end of the cycle. The last move did not come as an attack, it came as an announcement, across every frequency, in every known mode of perception. A signal unfolded from the deepest reaches of coalition space. Not a threat. Not a demand. A declaration written into the fabric of spacetime itself, carried by ancient machines that had outlived stars. The execution protocol was ending. The ancient minds had reached a conclusion they had never before permitted themselves to consider. Humanity could not be erased without collapsing the very order they claimed to protect. Every attempt to contain them had strengthened what they opposed. Every act of cruelty had only refined the Deathworlders' resolve, so the coalition made a choice born not of mercy, but of surrender to reality. They opened the sealed regions, barriers fell. Folded stars unfolded. Hidden systems rejoined the galaxy in slow, breathtaking cascades of light. Species thought erased returned in waves of stunned disbelief. The universe expanded overnight, not in size, but in memory. Human fleets entered coalition origin space not as conquerors, but as witnesses. They documented. They preserved. They ensured no civilization would vanish into silence again. There were no victory parades, no banners raised over alien worlds, only accountability. The ancient minds retreated from governance, their machines powering down one by one, leaving behind a galaxy no longer ruled by unseen executioners. Some species demanded retribution. Humanity did not forbid it, but they offered another path, a future where fear was no longer the foundation of order. In the years that followed, humanity changed the meaning of strength. They built systems designed to warn, not wipe out. To intervene, not erase. Their fleets became symbols not of dominance, but of arrival. The moment when help actually came, children across dozens of species grew up knowing the sound of human engines in the sky meant survival. And humanity never forgot the cost. Memorials drifted in deep space, silent constellations of names etched into alloy and light. Not monuments to victory, but reminders of restraint. Of what happens when power chooses responsibility over control. Long after the ancient coalition faded into history, long after the execution protocols became cautionary myths, one truth remained unchallenged. The galaxy had been shaped by beings who evolved in paradise, but it was saved by those who came from hell, and when the universe called for help one final time, it no longer asked who would answer. It already knew.